I had my 5th birthday on the first day at school, 24th of August 1937. I went to Atkinson Road Primary School in Benwell, and my teacher was Miss White. Miss White left soon after I became a missionary and went out to India. My father had education at home before I started school, so I was able to read and write, but I was better with figures. My father was Jewish and my mother was a Gentile, which meant we couldn't go to the school or the synagogue. Our family name was Younger, but we changed it into Young in case the Germans won. The school wouldn't allow children who were Jewish in the assembly. My mother talked to the headmistress and told her I had 2 religions, so I was allowed in. I took my mother's religion. I can remember carrying a gas mask to school and would get wrong if I left it behind, but I would try dodging taking it. We all had to have an identity bracelet and most were bought, but my father made mine in German silver. He used to make toys for me. There were air raids on the West Road and we could feel them in Benwell. Children would have to listen very carefully for the way home from school and for the air raids, and we were always walking in a big group together down the long streets of Benwell. These streets were named after the children of the man who built them. We would have to do air raid drills and can I remember being told that little ones had to go behind a wall. We would also go into people's houses if it happened on the way home. I can remember one day walking from school and we heard the aeroplanes in the sky. A man and his wife called us up to come into his house for safety and we could hear the planes overhead. We would go to school half days during the war. One week we would go for the morning, then the next week for the afternoon. There weren't enough teachers as many of them had to go to the war. Many teachers came back out of retirement to teach us. My father worked in Vickers Armstrong's Elsick as an engineer. The woman mainly worked making shells, rigger, slinger and tester of guns. Vickers in Elsick was long, one-level building and the Germans missed every time, tried to bomb it. There is a bed in the river and that's why they always made a mistake. They managed to bomb the factory at Scotchwood, though my father's friends joined the army. Many were captured and put into concentration camps. We had a party to mark the end of the war, and I was about 7 or 8. I remember thinking that we should turn off the lights in case Hitler could see us and the whole street was lit up. I remember saying, "Mr. Hitler is coming." When I was 13, I was moved to Pendower Girls' School. After that, I went to an extension school, which was for people who paid. I went for 2 years. It was part of the Newcastle University. The only part I didn't like was elocution lessons. I hated it. I left school at 17 years old. My father and grandfather paid for me for night schools to study. My first job was Ward's Shakespeare Street in the Big Market. It was a printer's binding books. I worked there for 5 years. Women were mainly typists and there were only a few female accountants, but I got a job at the Co-op during 1950s at Stour Street, Westgate. The Co-op had shops all over the city. I worked in a big office and everyone smoked too much. I remember going out with my friends and I was much smaller than them and they would lift me between them to make sure I would get into the same bars and cinemas that they could. I met my husband when he worked in the Co-op as a wholesale driver. I had to stop working when I got married as the Co-op wouldn't let 2 people from the same family work in the same place, even different departments. I had 3 children and brought them up alone after my husband left. My youngest was 6 at the time. I worked part-time cleaning, and my grandfather and father left enough money for me to pay for the children's education. Years later, when I lived in Greenway, Fenham, I was in my garden with my children and got talking to the woman next door, who had been home to look after her mother, who was my neighbour. After a while we talked, we realised that this was Miss White, my first teacher, who had left to go to India. Miss White said she thought she had recognised me, and I would have been 36 or 37 at the time. Education and religion were the two main things in my family. I taught my girls to read and write before they went to school, as I was taught.